Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today on McCarthyism.
Okay.
Well, not just McCarthyism itself, but like its lasting impact on the U.S. You sent over this lecture, and it's crazy how relevant this stuff still feels today.
Right.
It's like a masterclass in how fear and ideology can totally mess things up.
Yeah. It's fascinating that McCarthyism's legacy goes way beyond just a few politicians losing their jobs. It created this, atmosphere of suspicion that seeped into, everyday life for decades. I mean, imagine being afraid to even speak your mind at your own dinner table
Oh my God.
for fear of being labeled a communist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how deep this went.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The lecture really brings it home with these stories of people whose lives were totally upended.
Exactly. You can't talk about McCarthyism without talking about, the human cost.
Right.
Imagine being accused of disloyalty with no real evidence, your career gone, your name just dragged through the mud. Yeah. I mean, that was the reality for many.
The lecture mentions the Hollywood 10, a group of screenwriters and directors who became, the poster children for this whole mess. They refused to testify.
Right.
Before the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC for short, and because of that, they were blacklisted from Hollywood.
Yeah, so HUAC was this powerful committee formed to investigate, alleged communist activities in the U.S., and it became this tool for McCarthy and his allies to target anyone they deemed subversive.
Oh, wow.
And the Hollywood 10's case is so important because it shows how McCarthyism just choked free speech.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about these individuals. It was about making people afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah. And it wasn't just Hollywood, the lecture points out.
Right.
Universities, even lawyers, anyone with, even slightly left-leaning views was under scrutiny. It's crazy to think about professors losing their jobs for just expressing their opinions.
Yeah.
Just for speaking their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think about the impact on intellectual and legal independence.
Totally.
When academics and lawyers are afraid to speak freely, it's like attacking, the very foundation of a free society.
So we've got the human cost. We've got the fear. But this lecture also gets into how McCarthyism turned the political world upside down.
It absolutely did. How did that happen?
McCarthy was relentless, even going after President Truman.
Wow.
And his administration.
Yeah.
Accusations of communist infiltration in the government, particularly the State Department.
Right.
Just added fuel to the fire.
So you're telling me that even the president wasn't safe?
No. I mean, it was crazy. And you know who benefited from this?
Who?
The Republicans.
Oh.
They saw this golden opportunity to paint Democrats as weak on communism.
Oh, wow.
Exploiting this public fear to grab power.
It's almost unbelievable, right? These experts who literally predicted what was going to happen in China, they were just ignored because of political pressure. Well, that's exactly right. And that fear of communism, which was amplified by McCarthy, it helped sweep Eisenhower into the White House in 1952. And the quote-unquote loss of China to communism in 1949 was still so fresh in everyone's minds.
Of course.
And the Republicans just hammered home this narrative that the Democrats were failing to stop this communist threat.
But even McCarthy had his limits, right? The lecture talks about the Army-McCarthy hearings in 1954.
Right.
Where, his bullying tactics were broadcasted on TV for everyone to see.
It's fascinating how public opinion can just shift when people see things for themselves.
Totally.
And the hearings were like this national spectacle.
Boy, I bet.
And they exposed McCarthy's behavior for what it was, aggressive and mostly baseless. And this led to his censure by the Senate, which essentially ended his reign of terror.
So we see how this rocked the boat at home.
Right.
But the lecture also shows how McCarthyism had this, ripple effect on U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, yeah.
During the Cold War. It's it warped everything.
Absolutely. McCarthy's accusations just hit the State Department hard.
Yeah.
Especially experts who thought the U.S. should engage with communist China. And what's tragic is that many of these experts had actually predicted the communist victory.
Wow.
But they were sidelined.
Yeah.
Because of McCarthy's witch hunt.
So instead of listening to the people who knew what they were talking about, they were pushed aside because of this, political paranoia.
Exactly. It's a prime example of how fear and ideology can just trump common sense and expertise.
Wow.
And the lecture makes this direct connection to the U.S. refusing to recognize the People's Republic of China, which lasted all the way until Nixon's visit in 1972.
Wow.
That's how long McCarthyism's shadow lingered.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think that, like, one guy's crusade could have such a long-lasting impact.
Right.
The lecture also talks about Dean Acheson,
Okay.
who was Secretary of State at the time. Apparently, he altered this report about U.S. failures in China,
Yes.
which ended up scapegoating those China experts even further.
That's right. The pressure to conform to this anti-communist narrative was immense.
Wow.
And instead of learning from past mistakes,
Right.
it became all about finding someone to blame.
Yeah.
And then there's NSC 68, this top secret policy paper from 1950.
Okay.
And while McCarthy wasn't directly involved, the fear he generated definitely contributed to its implementation. It called for this massive increase in U.S. military spending
Oh, wow.
to contain communism,
Oh, wow.
basically pushing the U.S. towards, like, a more militarized approach
Yeah.
to foreign policy. And, we're still dealing with the consequences of that today.
It's amazing how McCarthy managed to be, like, right in the middle of so many pivotal moments.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the Korean War, for example.
Oh, yeah. He didn't miss a beat. He used the Korean War as yet another opportunity to attack Truman, claiming he hadn't done enough to prevent, the North Korean invasion.
Ah.
And it played right into the existing fear of losing the Cold War,
Right. The lecture explains how this kind of rhetoric further chipped away at, like, public trust in Truman's leadership, portraying him as indecisive in the face of, like, the communist threat.
It's classic political opportunism, using a national crisis to advance your own agenda and tear down your opponents. But perhaps his impact on the judicial system, specifically the Rosenberg case, is one of the most chilling examples of McCarthyism's reach.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Rosenberg case, where this couple was accused of being Soviet spies and passing atomic secrets,
Right.
really highlights, like, how far-reaching McCarthyism was. They were executed in 1953, despite ongoing debates about whether their trial was even fair.
Right. I mean, think about it. In the grip of this anti-communist hysteria, the judicial system, which is supposed to be, our safeguard of justice, was also influenced.
Wow.
The Rosenberg trial raises these serious questions about due process and the presumption of innocence. When fear and ideology take over, it's a chilling reminder
Yeah.
of how quickly things can unravel.
It's clear that McCarthyism was more than just, like, a political movement.
Right.
It was like this cultural earthquake
Yeah.
that shook the foundations of American life.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how historians have tried to make sense of this period.
Absolutely. And the lecture highlights 4 main schools of thought,
Okay.
each offering, a different lens through which to view McCarthyism. It underscores the complexity of history and how there are often multiple,
Right.
sometimes conflicting interpretations of events.
So you've got the Orthodox view, which sees McCarthyism as, like, a flawed but necessary response to Soviet espionage.
Right.
Then there's the revisionist take, arguing that it was more about power grabs than actual, national security concerns.
Mm.
And there's the post-revisionist view, which tries to strike a balance. It acknowledges, like, genuine concerns about espionage,
Right.
while emphasizing the overreach and harm caused by McCarthy's methods.
Right.
Finally, there's the New Left perspective, which critiques McCarthyism as, like, a tool to suppress dissent and maintain the status quo.
It's amazing how one period in history can be viewed through so many different lenses.
Yeah,
Each perspective, though, offers valuable insights
totally.
into the complexity of this era.
And that's why it's so important to consider, like, multiple viewpoints.
Absolutely.
It allows us to develop a richer and more nuanced understanding of the past
Yeah,
and its relevance to the present.
exactly. It's incredible, like, how much influence a single person like McCarthy had, shaping politics, people's lives, and even the way Americans saw each other.
It's like he unleashed something
Right.
that lingered long after he was, out of the picture.
Exactly. That culture of fear that he created had staying power,
Yeah.
impacting everything from universities and the arts
Totally.
to government policies and even personal relationships.
Wow, wow.
It shows that even when the loudest voices are gone, the damage can be lasting.
Okay, so, like, why does this matter to us now? Why are we digging up something that happened decades ago?
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? Studying McCarthyism isn't just a history lesson.
Right.
It's about understanding how easily history can repeat itself if we're not careful.
Oh, totally.
It's a cautionary tale about what happens when power goes unchecked, when ideology trumps reason, and when civil liberties are eroded in the name of security.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that we can't take our freedoms for granted.
Exactly.
We have to question authority, protect free speech, and make sure that everyone gets a fair shake.
Absolutely.
Even when things feel, scary.
Yeah.
McCarthyism shows us what can happen when fear and suspicion just run wild.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the patterns, seeing how those same forces can pop up in different ways, even today.
Oh, yeah.
We can learn from the mistakes of the past to create a better future.
This lecture also emphasizes, the human cost.
Absolutely.
We can't forget about the people who lived through all this turmoil.
Right.
And the scars that it left behind.
It's about understanding what it was like for those who were falsely accused, blacklisted, ostracized.
Right.
It's about remembering those who stood up for their principles, even when it was dangerous.
Yeah.
Their stories are these powerful reminders of the importance of courage and integrity.
So to sum up what we've learned so far, McCarthyism had this, massive impact on individuals, politics, foreign policy, and even the way Americans saw each other. It's a stark reminder that history isn't just dates and events. It's about the choices we make and the values we stand for.
It's about recognizing the potential for things to go very wrong, both in ourselves and in our institutions, and actively working to prevent that.
Okay, so this deep dive has been like a wake-up call about the importance of staying informed, thinking critically, and upholding, democratic values. We can't afford to forget these lessons.
Here's something to consider. What can we learn from McCarthyism to make sure that fear and ideology don't undermine our values and institutions today? How can we as individuals and as a society, prevent the rise of movements that thrive on fear and division?
Those are really important questions, especially when you look at what's happening, around the world.
Right.
The rise of populism, the spread of misinformation, the increasing polarization.
Exactly.
All too familiar.
McCarthyism might seem like, ancient history, but the forces that drove it are still very much at play.
Yeah.
It's this call to action for all of us to be, informed and engaged citizens,
Right.
to stand up for what we believe in and to hold our leaders accountable.
Yeah.
The fight for justice, equality, and freedom, it never really ends.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
Yeah.
It's clear that McCarthyism wasn't just a historical blip.
Right.
It reflects something deeper about human nature and what happens when fear and ideology take over.
Absolutely. It shows that history isn't something that we just study. It's something that we live.
Right.
And it's up to all of us to learn from the past and work towards a better future.
It's easy to get, caught up in the big names and events.
Right.
But the real legacy of McCarthyism is in, the countless individual stories.
Absolutely.
The people whose lives were forever changed.
Yeah, the ripple effect of McCarthyism is profound.
Yeah.
One accusation, one suspicion could trigger consequences that impacted not only the individual,
Right.
but also their families,
Oh, wow.
the communities, even future generations.
It's like a domino effect, right?
Exactly.
The lecture talks about professors losing their jobs, artists being blacklisted, scientists being denied funding, their contributions, their potential, all stifled because of baseless accusations and political maneuvering.
And the chilling effect on free speech and dissent just can't be overstated.
Totally.
It wasn't just about silencing individuals.
Right.
It was about creating an environment where everyone felt pressured to conform, to self-censor.
Oh, wow.
Imagine being afraid to voice your opinion, even in your own home,
Right.
for fear of being branded a communist.
Yeah, it's a reminder that freedom isn't something you get, it's something you constantly have to protect.
You got it.
The lecture also makes a point of highlighting the different historical interpretations of McCarthyism,
Okay.
which I think is really important.
It is.
It forces us to grapple with the nuances of history
Right.
and understand that there are often, multiple perspectives, sometimes conflicting ones, on the same event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's rarely, a simple answer,
Right.
a clear-cut right or wrong.
It's a reminder to be, critical thinkers,
Totally.
to question the narratives we're given, and to seek out different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
Thinking about McCarthyism in today's context,
Yeah.
one of the most striking parallels I see is how social media can amplify and accelerate the spread of fear and misinformation.
That's a great point. It's like we've created these digital echo chambers where unverified claims and accusations can spread like wildfire, damaging reputations.
Oh, totally.
Fueling outrage before the truth even has a chance to catch up.
It's almost like McCarthyism on steroids, reaching a global audience in an instant.
Right.
And the anonymity that the internet offers can embolden people to say things they might never say in person.
Yeah.
Making it even harder to, combat.
It's a sobering thought, but it also underscores the importance of media literacy, critical thinking skills, and the ability to separate fact from fiction online.
Right.
We need to be, responsible consumers of information and hold ourselves and others accountable for what we share and promote online.
Because the stakes are high.
They are.
As we've seen with McCarthyism, when fear and ideology drive our actions, the consequences can be devastating.
Absolutely.
Not just for individuals, but for, society as a whole.
It's a stark reminder that we must always be vigilant in defending the principles of justice, fairness, and due process, and that we must speak out against injustice wherever we see it.
I agree.
The lessons of McCarthyism are timeless and universal.
Totally.
They remind us to be better, more informed, more compassionate citizens.
So this deep dive has been both fascinating and a bit unsettling.
It has.
But ultimately, a valuable reminder of how fragile democracy is and how important it is to protect our freedoms.
Absolutely.
Thanks for, walking us through this complex and, frankly, disturbing chapter of American history.
My pleasure. And remember, the best way to honor the victims of McCarthyism and prevent history from repeating itself is to stay informed, to think critically, and to never take our freedoms for granted.
You got it. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.